So what do they have to show for it? Where do relations stand? President Xi, remember, was among the first leaders to congratulate Prime Minister Modi after the results. The relationship has moved significantly in the last 1.5 years post the Doklam crisis. The two sides are expected to carry the Wuhan spirit forward in the months ahead. There is a similar, as I said, informal summit slated for later this year, most likely in Prime Minister Modi's parliamentary constituency of Banaras. Just last year, the two leaders had met 4 times. So where does the relationship stand? On Pakistan, India and China pursue different narratives. For years, China blocked India's bid to name Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar as a global terrorist, but it relented in March. Post the Pulwama attacks, when supporting Pakistan became untenable, this time India has agreed not to raise any country-specific terror issues at the SCO, possibly because China has requested it. But both India and Pakistan are members of a group called the RATS, that is the Regional Anti-Terror Structure. It's part of the SCO. Ahead of the summit, sources indicated that China was pushing both India and Pakistan to restart a dialogue. India has maintained relations with Pakistan are a bilateral matter, and talks and terror cannot go together. The other big talking point is China's Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. Although India has refused to join it, China continues to push for India's membership. Bringing China on board is going to be a big success. Bringing India, rather, on board will be a big success for China. India rejects the idea because the BRI violates its sovereignty. One of the projects of the BRI, that is the CPEC, passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. That issue is non-negotiable for India. It is also important to note that India is pushing its own north-south transport corridor, a trade corridor that runs from Iran to Russia. This ambitious project runs counter to China's BRI. Despite these challenges, the India-China partnership has a lot of potential. With the changing geopolitical environment, the two countries share a common agenda. One example, of course, is trade protectionism from the US. The Chinese Foreign Ministry on Monday said, trade protectionism, I'm quoting from him, and unilateral policies are now actively gaining momentum, and the issue of how to respond to US pressure and trade protectionism is important not only for China. Basically, they want India and other countries on board. In political terms, such engagement becomes a broader hedge against uncertainties in the relationship. So a lot to discuss. Dr. Swaran Singh, Professor of International Relations at JNU, joining us from Chengdu in China. Good evening, Dr. Singh. Good to have you on the show. The two leaders met today. They had a dialogue. We heard from the foreign ministries of both the countries. But what do you think transpired, and what are the challenges and potentials going forward?
First thing important to see is that both these leaders not only have a certain amount of chemistry, they also repeatedly make sure they showcase that bonhomie that they are building between them. Second, I think both are also now going to be in position for next 5 years or more. And therefore, they can think of long-term relationship and decisions that will impact long-term. Third is that now China is the largest Asian economy, India is the third largest. And that is important because if BRI has to be successful, and now we notice China creating situations where they could co-opt India into BRI. We have noticed BRI expanding from territorial physical projects to increasingly towards digital and now cultural connectivity, and that will create more space for India because India is IT power and of course a civilization. So even within BRI there are going to be dimensions and components where India will be able to really contribute a great deal. Also, I think important to understand that when they meet in a context like Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they are today being seen as the main drivers of whatever decision making happens. And I want to underline the fact that yes, a particular country may not be named in the final declaration, but if you remember the Qingdao summit of 2017, certain outfits were clearly named in about 5 paragraphs. So naming and shaving could still happen. And I think that is very important that as Prime Minister has now started having a very assertive counter-terrorism strategy or policy, it is good to keep China on our side in that sense. And it will be important to see how the Shanghai Cooperation Organization this time formulates, because both Russia and China do have already very assertive policy on countering terrorism, and India apparently is joining that kind of tone and tenor. And I think that kind of endorsement of Shanghai Cooperation Organization to this assertive policy in countering terrorism of not talking to Pakistan will be an interesting outcome, most likely. Of course, they will also be willing to discuss about the problem of energy. US sanctions on Iran and Venezuela have created problem for both China and India. I think that really brings them together to really think of how to deal with that reality again. So there are going to be increasingly issues where you will see China and India standing together with each other.
Very quickly, I want to ask you, you said a particular country. We know that Pakistan is not going to be named, and yet it remains the elephant in the room. You say that they're going to focus a lot on countering terror. But if you do not address the problem, if you do not address it squarely, then the tokenism doesn't help very much. Is India's focus now on looking east and engaging more with China, which will take care of Pakistan? Is that the idea?
India basically had made sure that the old insinuation that India-Pakistan tensions do not allow regional development initiatives to proceed, has India now changed that policy? So we are saying that regional cooperation should not suffer because India-Pakistan have problems, and therefore we are shifting to BIMSTEC, which is only a pause button, which is a kind of a straight indication to Pakistan that there is not going to be stopping of regional cooperation. India has moved towards east clearly, from look east to act east, now Indo-Pacific, and we are building cooperation with China, Japan, Korea, and Australia, and everybody else. India is increasingly seen as an important nation, and Prime Minister this time is attending the first multilateral meeting after being re-elected with larger majority in the largest democracy on the planet in that sense. So he is going there with a very different image of being a strong leader of a powerful country in that sense. And these countries will also engage India just as much as India wants to engage them.
Right.
In fact, it's going to be interesting that who the Indian Prime Minister is not meeting is being debated much more than who he is meeting there in the meetings.